Why are you laughing at me? Because
we made it.
Should I do that over?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, this is Beth with Premium Fontent. Today we're going to be cutting and assembling our fur for our fawn legs. To join the herd, please like and subscribe. Hit that notification bell. Let's get started. For this part of the process, you will need your cutting board, your scissors or box cutter, your fur, a Sharpie of a different color than your fur, and your pattern from last time. Is that it?
I don't know.
Oh,
And a sewing machine?
And a thread, a sewing machine, and pins.
And a lot of patience.
And a lot of patience.
One of our recommended tools for this project is seam clips or sewing clips. You'll also want either elastic or drawstring elastic. You'll also need a comb or some type of animal fur brush.
So first you're going to make sure that your pattern piece and your fur direction are going the same way. We marked where our fur was when we made our patterns, and then you just want to make sure your fur is following that line. And then you're going to pin your pattern as flat as you can. And then you're going to take a Sharpie and start tracing. I'm using a silver metallic Sharpie, so it will show up on the black side of this fabric. You're also going to want to make sure you transfer over these tick marks from your pattern so you will know where to line up your pieces. Mark which piece it is and which way the fur is going. When you cut this out, make sure you give yourself enough seam allowance. We've flipped the pattern piece over, and now we're going to repeat the process on the reverse side for our left side. With the calf pieces done, you're going to repeat this process for every single piece of the pattern. So our hip portion is a little bit different. Since we only did a half a duct tape form, what we're going to do is we're going to trace this pattern. Put our ticks on. And then we're going to just flip it and trace it on this side. And you're going to follow the same process for your back hip piece. For my pattern, I got 2 yards of fur, which as you can see fits all of my pieces. If you're on the taller or curvier side, you might want to get a little bit extra fur, but 2 yards is what we've all found works best for us. It has all of our pattern pieces and leaves enough for things like ears and tail. Now it's time to cut out our pattern pieces. To do this, we're going to use a cutting mat and a box cutter.
So for our next step, we're going to be cutting into our fabric. Now faux fur is a little bit different than your normal cotton or similar type fabric because it has this fur side. If you cut straight into this, it is going to just leave a straight line on your fur and you're going to lose material and it's going to leave you terrible seams. So we are going to use a box knife and ever so carefully, leaving a little bit of seam allowance, about 1/2 inch, cut around our fabric. Not hard enough. Cut around our fabric. A sharp knife is best for this. But without cutting through the fur. You will have shedding no matter what, but the goal is to not have flat ends of your fur. Now for the calf pieces only, this is where our foot is, and there might be a little bit of wiggle room about where you want the overlap between your shoe and your leg pieces to actually end and begin. So I'm just going to leave this long and we can trim it away in the end.
If you do not have access to a box cutter, what you can do is use a pair of scissors and do very small little cuts as to, once again, not cut all of your fur. So you're gonna wanna try to get as close as you can to the backing and just do very tiny little cuts. Box cutter is definitely a much easier option, but this works in a pinch. First, we're gonna sew the darts on each leg piece. To make this easier for you in the long run, what you're going to want to do is take as much fur as you can and fold it under your fabrics when pinning together so that you have very little to no fur in your seam allowance. This will make brushing out your seams easier. So as much as possible, you're gonna want your seam to look like that, where there's very little fur poking out of the inside of your seams. Repeat this for all of the darts on every leg piece. Once again, every time you pin your seams, you're gonna wanna get as much of the fur fiber out of your seam as possible. You can always brush your seams to get any leftover furs that might have gotten stuck. But if you take your time and are patient, this can really pay off in the end. If you have them, seam clips can be a lot easier to handle, especially when you have bulky fabric like fur. We will put a link to clips like these in the description. If you like our content and would like to support us beyond watching our videos and liking, you can also follow the links in the description to our website and affiliated links. If you like this video, be sure to leave a thumbs up and comment your favorite sewing tip below. After sewing the dart, the best way we've found is to fold each piece in half and sew a tube of your calf and your thighs, and then assemble them together for each leg, and then attach the leg to your hip piece. Another tip we found is if you sew your pattern pieces with a brightly colored thread or a thread that is very different color from your fabric, it won't show on the outside, and it'll make it easier in case you've made a mistake and you need to go back and correct yourself by seam ripping. Now we're going to sew each piece.
Sewing faux fur is a little more difficult than sewing a standard cotton, so don't be surprised if your machine struggles a little bit with some of the bulkier parts, like going over the darts at the knee and calf. Take your time, make sure you're using a sharp needle, and just be careful. Next, we're going to connect the leg pieces by turning the thigh inside out and inserting the calf piece so we can pin the knee joint together. Once they're pinned together, you'll sew each leg together to create two separate legs. Don't forget to brush out the seams. You can do this as you go or do it all at the end. Once the hip pieces are assembled, you're going to sew the legs to the hips. Remember to pay attention to which leg goes on which side, otherwise you could end up with a wonky fit.
So in the next part, we're gonna add a little piece so that our leg kind of naturally tapers this way instead of just going straight down. So we are going to take our knife and just cut straight up here, just a few inches, no further. And then we're going to make a little triangle insert and just sew it straight onto that part. So, real technical. And it's much too big. But that's okay. It's okay. Just trim it on here and then you'll just trim it off at the end.
Now that the fur legs are assembled, we need to put in the waistband. Measure around your hips or your waist wherever the waist of your legs is going to sit. Cut the elastic to size and then pin it to your legs. Depending on how close you were in your seam allowances and measurements, you may not have a ton of extra fabric compared to your elastic, and that's totally fine. That's where the drawstring elastic comes in handy because you can make sure that you cinch that waist as tight as it needs to be to keep those pants from falling down. If you're using drawstring elastic or a thicker elastic, make sure that you do a zigzag stitch at the top border and at the bottom border. And if you're using drawstring elastic, make sure that you don't stitch into the drawstring channel. Don't forget to brush out the fur from the waistband. This will help hide the stitching in the events that you don't wear a sash or have belts to cover it. And there you go, the pants are assembled. We'll cover assembling and installing the tail in the next video.